Welcome back to Student Hub Live. Our Broadening Horizons Careers event is going swimmingly, and we are going to be talking about how to be an interviewed star. So let me introduce you to my next guest, who is Lynn Johnson. Lynn, welcome.
Hello, Karen.
I love your
Nice to be here
knockdown
today.
hair.
Yes,
Was
yes,
this
I've,
was this
I've
an
been growing
alternative?
it. Yes, yes, just been growing it through lockdown, as many people have. Doing some haircuts myself. So yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, that's wonderful. Now, you're here to talk about how to be an interview star. And I imagine that because you've got this star on your head, you've got some clever technique to fill us all in with. Because interviewing is one of those things that can be developed. So, could you start by telling us some of the common interview questions and what people can do to answer those succinctly?
Absolutely. So I suppose I'd start by suggesting that when you go to an interview, maybe don't wear a big headdress that says interview star. It kind of might be a bit distracting for people,
Only
possibly.
for an interview with
But
me at Student Hub Live, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So people do get really nervous, don't they, about what kind of questions they might get asked. And there is so much information on the internet that you could spend forever Googling, this question, that question, how to prepare. I think that when people think about the types of questions that get asked at interview, there are lots of different questions. And recently, employers have been moving more to perhaps more strengths based interview questions, which are quite difficult to prepare for in a sense, because interviews want to get a sense of really who you are, what you enjoy. So there's little that you can do to prep for them in that way. However, whilst those kind of questions have been growing, I think most interviewers still tend to rely on what we call competency-based interviews, and questions that really are testing your competency. And a competency-based interview question is really the kind of question that might start with, "Can you tell me about a time when you worked as part of a team? Can you tell me about a time when you made a really difficult decision, had a difficult decision to make, and how you made that?" And you could imagine that if you were asked one of these questions in an interview, and I'm sure people think, "Oh gosh, yes, I can really remember being asked that, and I wasn't sure how I could answer that." Well, the reason employers like these kinds of questions is because it's a way of them finding out kind of how you've performed in the past. So if you did that in the past, what did you do? And they can really think, well, if we know what you did in the past, then we might be able to judge what you're going to do in the future when you're working for us. So when an employer asks you that, they're really interested in kind of the actions you took. What was the process you went through? They're less interested, to be honest, in you just giving lots of different examples. And I think that's a really common mistake to make. So you're asked, can you tell me about a difficult decision you made? And in a panic, you just say, "Oh, here are many, many different difficult decisions I've made." But that's really not going to hit the mark. So here's my clue of how to answer. And here we have, oh, star. So how to become an interview star. So we've got STAR, situation, task, action, result. And hopefully this will make it go to people's head. So I'm going to give you an example. So I'm imagining I'm at an interview and I'm being asked, "Lynn, can you give me an example of how you made a difficult decision?" Because maybe it's a job that in the future I'm going to have lots of difficult decisions I need to make. And I'm thinking, what is an example of this? And I might not be able to think of a work example. And it doesn't matter if the example comes from a different part of your life, perhaps some voluntary work you do, perhaps another area. So the example I'm going to draw here is last year, perhaps, when I had to organize a large holiday to celebrate my parents' golden wedding anniversary. So I'm thinking of situation. The situation is I'm going to talk about a holiday I had to prepare for my family for the golden wedding anniversary. The task was to try and fit that in with everyone's different needs, travel needs, some people on public transport, different ages. So that was the task. It was quite difficult. Now, the bit the employer is interested in is the action. So we're looking at the A, the action, and that's the bit you need to focus on. What did I do? So what I did in this example is I did a doodle poll to all my relatives and asked them what dates they were free on to get the best date. And then I sent them an email and asked them what their requirements were. What did they need for this to be a good holiday for them? I then used social media and asked all my network whether they could recommend anywhere they'd been to that met these needs in the Lake District. I did a bit of research on the different ideas that came forwards and did a pros and cons of the top three. I put those in front of the people in my family. They chose one. Now, the result was it's a fabulous holiday. We had an amazing holiday. And in fact, we're going there again next year. And you can imagine using this star, you can see that I didn't just flip a coin and choose someone. I went through a process, and that's the bit an employer's looking for. So hopefully, star, situation, task, action, result.
Oh, that's really nifty, and I bet people will remember that. It reminds me, I guess, of when we're doing assignments and we must answer the question, or in an exam. Very often you think, I'll just write down everything I know about that and hope that some of it's there. It's about how you frame it and
Absolutely.
contextualize it, and that's the main thing. Michelle, for those of you who don't know, Michelle is my very, very dear colleague at work, and if she were ever to leave, I don't think I would ever forgive myself. But you are very interested in the session, Michelle. So do you have anything you want to ask Lynn about interviews?
Yes. So one of the questions or feedback, a bit of feedback that I've had is that I'm not showing enough impact when I give an interview. And I was just wondering how you might actually give some suggestions to us. How do we demonstrate that we are the one that the employer wants? How do we demonstrate impact?
Yeah.
Good question.
Um, And I think that can be quite difficult when you're nervous, can't it, Michelle? Because when you're nervous, it's likely that you perhaps dry up, you don't really shine and become yourself. And if you think of that first impressions, often it's about the energy perhaps you're bringing into the room and showing your interest in them. So I think we just mentioned star, and I think having some examples which you can use, but also perhaps thinking of your USP, so your unique selling points for that particular job. And I'd say, in terms of top tips, which I know we might look at later, being for any job interview, I would want to know what my three top selling points were for that job and really hitting that home at any point.
Brilliant. Well, Anna says she's a visual learner, Lynn, and she says that thanks to your wonderful headpiece, she will always remember how to be an interview star. So it's definitely worth
Thank you
all
very
the
much.
effort for Anna. So tips on interview success, then, Lynn. Unless there were any others that you had, Michelle.
Well, I always think that you should dress your best. And absolutely, if you don't have a suit or if you don't have something that looks great on you, do ask your friends to lend you something or go out and get something. It's really important that you feel comfortable and that you look great. I'm wearing my favorite color purple today. I love the cut of this dress here. Not saying I'm going to an interview, but I just do love looking good when it comes time to go to interview.
Ah,
Hmm.
and you're only here for another half an hour with us, Michelle, aren't you?
Well, I can't tell you what I'm doing this afternoon. That would give it away, Karen.
Well, if you were ever to get another job, Michelle, I would sulk so much and I would come and find you and bring you back.
Oh, bless, that's so sweet. No, I can't imagine my life without
And
you
so
either,
would all
Karen.
our 180,000 students, I'm sure.
Oh, bless. Well, at least the ones on this call. We've got some great students here today, and they're absolutely loving that hat and that star technique.
Brilliant. I think
Fabulous.
interviews can be a really, really stressful thing. Now Megan, oh, she's off now. Off to the garden. We've been talking about the Abintegro suite of various things, and that this
Hmm.
gives simulators of various psychometric tests. But there's also a way to simulate interview questions, which can be really useful. Now, this is something that I can imagine would be really handy, but it's not something I imagine we would all race to do. But I can certainly see the benefit. Lynn, can you tell us how all that works and why there's a value in practicing some of these questions?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think especially in this time, we know from employers that they are still recruiting. And whilst a few of them may do that face to face, most people are going to be looking at Skype or video interviews. So it's something that make people quite nervous. Now we have got this tool, Abintegro, and you can access that on the career site. It's a tool that we own, students we have a license for you to use. It's not something you can use generally. And it's a way of you can program program the different questions that you want to ask. So you can choose the questions, and you can set it so that it could video you, and you actually record yourself as you would be in a video, or just oral, and you can record that, and so you can actually see what you would be like, and do it as many times as you want. It's also got lots of tips from employers. So when you look at a question, you could then have a look at the tip from different employers and see what are they really asking for when they ask that question. What are they looking for? And so if I was going for an interview and I was a bit nervous about video interviews, I think I'd definitely use that resource. And even if you haven't got an interview around the corner, there's nothing to stop you having a go at that resource, knowing it's there, and just seeing how you can practice those interview questions. Practice does make perfect, or at least a bit more confident, if not perfect.
And I think it's one of those things where it's like an essay answer or something. When you articulate something, you understand it better. It goes in, and you can also think about the various things. Sometimes you'll have a big long answer and think, "Oh, I wish I hadn't told them about this, that, or the other." Or
Yeah.
it gives you a chance to actually practice and rehearse and objectively look at how you're coming across.
Yeah, I think if we all had interviews every Monday morning, we would be less nervous if we knew we had a job interview. It's a bit like children at school. They get so many tests at the moment that my children aren't
Yeah.
particularly phased by doing a
No.
test. So practice, certainly makes a difference. So don't leave it till it's a crisis activity and you've got an interview tomorrow. Use the resources that are available to you now to kind of increase your confidence.
Brilliant. Well, Lynn, thank you so much. You have been a wonderful star. You've given us a very memorable
Fabulous.
session with heaps of practical advice. So, what are you going to do for the rest of the day now?
I'm working with a colleague trying to make a Powtoon video that's going to be available to students later. So we're looking at an animated video.
Fantastic. What an exciting lot of things our colleagues are doing today. It's very interesting. Well, thank you so much for coming along, Lynn. Enjoy the rest of your
You're
day, and we'll
welcome.
see you very soon. We're going to have a short break now, and then we're going to look at teaching and education alternatives. I know this session is going to appeal to lots and lots of different students. So please stay tuned, and we'll see you in just a couple of minutes after this short break.